Good morning. I am going to show you guys how to set up your data table for the study guide. So this should look very similar to our formative, and it is also going to look very similar to our summative. So you guys should have no problem figuring out how to set it up. So the first thing you need to understand is what is your independent variable and what is your dependent variable. So our independent variable is what we are changing, what are we in control of, and that is the beak type. Okay, so independent variable is beak type. Oops, sorry. Then you need to be like, okay, well, what are we counting? What are we collecting data on? And so any of these options here, number of food, number of birds, or number of food per bird will be a good dependent variable. So I'm going to do number of food per bird. So that is your independent and your dependent variable. Now we need to fill in the rest of the information on our data table, which is a simple division problem. So the first one for generation 1, player 1, all you're doing is 22 divided by 2, which is 11. For generation 2, it's 25 divided by 2, which is 12.5. 26 divided by 3, 8.6. 23 divided by 4, you get 5.75. 19 divided by 5, you get 3.8. Then you move on to player 2. So 21 divided by 2, 10.5. 26 divided by 3, you get 8.6. 20 divided by 3, 6.6. 17 divided by 2, 8.5. 14 divided by 1 is 14. And then you move on to player 3. So 6 divided by 2, 3. 8 divided by 1, 8. 5 divided by 0 is 0. Okay, so now that you have your data table set up, all you need to do is set up your graph. So I have provided you a graph checklist on the right. So let's just start working through our checklist. X-axis needs to be labeled. Okay, so here's my X, here's my Y. I know in the green box it says that the X-axis is generation or time. So I'm going to write generation. And then, so my x-axis is labeled. I can cross that off. Now my y-axis needs to be labeled. So the y-axis is supposed to be number of food per bird. Okay, so now I can cross that off. The next one is scale, numbers equally spaced. All right, so this is the hardest part usually for you guys. So generation is highlighted in blue in my data table. So I have 5 generations that I need to put on my graph. So I'm going to count how many lines I have across the bottom of my graph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10. So I know that I can go every other line. So this can be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so then the next part is setting up my y-axis, and this part is the hardest part for you guys because it's not as straightforward sometimes. So the y-axis is highlighted in that reddish color. There's an equation you guys can use if you would like. It is max minus minimum divided by number of lines. Whatever answer you get, you need to round up. Okay, so how to apply that equation? So looking at my y-axis, I know I need to be looking at the number of food per bird. So that's the red spot. I need to find my max number and my minimum number. So my highest number, my lowest. So right now 14 right here is my highest. and then I need to find my lowest number, which is 0. Notice that I'm looking at all 3 players' data, not just one player, because I'm graphing the number of food per bird for each player. Okay? So if I set up my equation then, I would do 14 minus 0 divided by the number of lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Divided by 14. 14 minus 0 is 14. 14 divided by 14 gives me 1. So I'm just going to go up by 1 on my axes. So for this one, you didn't even need the equation, but on your summative, you might. Okay, so now we have our graph set up. Next up is creating, so let's cross off on our checklist, scale. Do we have our numbers equally spaced? Yep, that's correct. So the next step is our key. We need to draw a key or add a key. So I'm going to use orange to represent player 1. So when I look at player 1's data, I'm looking at generation number and total number of food, blue and red. So generation 1, player 1 had 11 pieces of food per bird. So I'm going to find 11 and 1 and put a dot there. Generation 2, player 1 had 12.5 pieces of food. Generation 3, they had 8.6. Generation 4, 5.75. Generation 5, 3.8. Okay, so I got my dots on there. Now I need to connect them. Oh gosh, sorry, give me one moment. Alright, there's player 1. So then you're going to choose a color for player 2. I'm going to use green. So player 2 in generation 1 had 10.5 pieces of food. Then they had 8.6. Then they had 6.6. Then 8.5. Jump back up here. And then 14. Okay. And then player 3 needs a color. I'm going to use pink. So I'm going to look at generation 1. They had 3 pieces of food. Generation 2, 8 pieces of food. Generation 3, 0. They went extinct. So at that point, I do not include any more data for them. And that is your key. So then go ahead and cross that off. The last step is a title. So the best way to write a title is to write what is on your y-axis versus x-axis. So number of food per bird versus generations. Okay, and that graph right there is a 3. If you're looking for an A, all you need to do is write a more creative title. Hope that helps.